G'day, I'm Red Fan. I write a Rust editor blog called Sometimes a Tree. You can find it at sometimesthetree.com. And I just wanted to make this video as a video response to a weekly Marmot that Law posted. Actually, a few months back. It's a little bit outdated, but I haven't really been up to date with anything that's happening in WoW or with unfortunately the Marmots or PST as I usually would. Just thanks to things like a unit schedule and things like that that have kept me really busy, and general lack of interest in 4.3. But anyway, so I understand that Symbiosis has changed considerably during the beta. I played early in the beta. I was familiar with the first iteration of it. I'm aware of some changes to things since then, and they might have been changed since Law's video. And I'm hoping that I can talk generally enough that those specific changes don't really matter. But feel free to jump in if any of them actually do make a big difference. But what I really want to talk about is that I think a lot of people overreact to Symbiosis. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as what people think it is, and I think people get a bit too worked up over it. I don't see it as being, this, potentially game-breaking or game-changing ability. I don't see any classes playing differently because of Symbiosis. It's, almost a nothing stat, almost a nothing ability, I should say. And here's why. So first of all, Law made 4 points in his video. I'll start with the first one, which is that he said the ability is just kind of OP, and like I said, I disagree with that. He mentioned that if you were to cast Symbiosis at a Holy Pally, that Holy Pally gets a Battle Res, and that means that your 1 Druid is worth 2 B-Res to the raid. I'm pretty sure Blizzard fixed that by just making there a limit to the number of Battle Reses you can use per encounter, and I think that's all there is to it. In a 10-man raid, all that bringing a Druid does, if you weren't going to bring one already, is it means that if you cast it on a Holy Pally, then if the Druid dies, the Druid can be B-Res, if you don't already have DK. In a 25-man raid, if you have 2 B-Reses, it means that, well, now you can get a 3rd, so you're not worse off than anyone else. But, again, I just don't, it's not like you can just chain B-Res people. And if you're having to chain B-Res people, there's probably something wrong with your raid that isn't, really that, Symbiosis isn't really the main contributing factor there. The second point that he made was with Tranquility, and he used Shadow Priests as an example, obviously, because Shadow Priests get Tranquility from Symbiosis. Now, this is the first time in the game that, well, at least for as long as I can remember, Shadow Priests haven't actually just had Divine Hymn. Like, that used to be a priest ability, and now they've lost that for the sake of the talent rework, so that now that's a, I don't even know if it's, I'm guessing it's Holy only. And Disc has, its own cooldown, barrier. Something else I don't know, I haven't really played a priest since the patch. But yeah, so a Druid being worth 2 Tranks, well, it's a DPS class having a Tranquility. Right, for as long as I can remember, Shadow Priests have had Divine Hymn, and Boomkins have had Tranquility. It's not an issue. Boomkins still actually have Tranquility. They don't really cast Tranquility. They never really casted Divine Hymn right through Wrath or Kata. I don't think you're really adding anything new. And if you are, that's, a big chunk of time they're not DPSing, so I think when that really comes into, or when that really plays a part, is when maybe you're trying to 2-heal something on a 10-man raid that really should be 3 healing, but you're trying to get away with 2, you're just trying to squeeze it out, and maybe you can use a bit of a boost. That's fine. If you are doing that, though, I mean, realistically, you should probably be running a 3rd healer then. And if you have 3 healers and you're needing to do that, your healers probably just need small gear. Like, you can't blame Symbiosis as like a balance problem when it only affects people who are not properly geared. Okay, so that's, the kind of OP thing dealt with. Another issue that Law brought up was that the roles that Symbiosis affect aren't really balanced. That it'll really boost, say, the primary role of one class, but it'll be useless effect on the druid, and vice versa. Like the druid might get something really cool out of it and really useful, but the other class that you're casting on gets something rubbish. And so this gets me into thinking that looking at what all the individual abilities and stuff that classes gain, how that impacts a raid. I mean, what Law was talking about, his examples were boomkins get mirror images, and use it as an example of something positive that they get, versus a mage getting healing touch, which has absolutely no benefit in a raid situation. So mirror images, I don't think that a boomkin will ever want to cast mirror images ever in a fight, unless it's like there's like nothing to do for a second, like the boss goes immune for 5 seconds and you want to cast it at the end of that 5 seconds. Or maybe if you have to move or something like that. Because the way boomkin DPS works is obviously you're going side to side, you're trying to get from eclipse state. As soon as you leave eclipse state, you're trying to get into the next eclipse state ASAP. And by casting mirror images, that's a global cooldown that doesn't contribute to you getting across to eclipse state. So I think you'd actually lose more DPS just by casting mirror images by being slower into eclipse than you would gain from having the mirror images actually DPSing. So yeah, I don't think that's a realistic positive thing. Another one that he brought up was that boomkins get intervene while from prot warriors who gain frenzied regen. And I think frenzied regen may be one of the ones that has changed. The most recent list I looked at was, it said savage defense, but again, I'm not so sure on that one because that was like a comment on Wowhead or something like that. So, and I think it was dated a few months ago. So, take that with a grain of salt. But anyway, like intervene, yeah, it's pretty rubbish for raids. Like maybe on some trash pool, it might be useful for a boomkin to be able to intervene and then typhoon. That's the extent of the usefulness I can think of for that ability. Frenzied regen, well, that actually brings me into my next point, which is all tanks get something. Ooh, mosquito flying around. All tanks get a tanking cooldown basically from Symbiosis. You have obviously warriors. I think if it's savage defense, then they get 45% dodge for a few seconds, and if it's frenzied regeneration, then they regenerate some health. So that's a pretty good tanking ability. You have Pallies, I think they get Bark Skin, which gives them 10% damage reduction, plus a whole bunch of other cool features like no interrupts on spellcasting, immune to sleep and fear, and all these other character controlling things. There's Brewmaster monks get 25% flat damage reduction, but they don't get all those extra cool things that Bark Skin gives them. And then lastly, what's the other tanking spec? Oh yeah, Death Knights get what do Death Knights get? That's right, a health increase, 15% extra health. So basically, tanks all get something pretty useful, but nobody else does. So going on to Law's third point, which is that you end up with, and actually his fourth point as well, third of all, he said that organization would be a problem between, the druids wanting to cast it on somebody for a certain benefit and the raid leaders wanting to cast it on somebody. And also then his fourth point said that spell is just too complicated. Both of those are kind of solved by just saying, well, if you're raiding, cast it at a tank, and that is the answer. And that's exactly what you need to do. I mean, it's basically just a boost to tanks. As far as raiding is concerned, there are some like gimmicky situational uses where like maybe one of those other spells you get will just be ridiculously good for a particular fight. But that's on a fight by fight basis, and that depends on the individual mechanics of that fight. On the whole, in like a general kind of PvE scenario, I shouldn't say scenario anymore, but a PvE raid single target boss encounter. 9 times out of 10, you want to put Symbiosis on a tank. Now, I don't want to just totally disagree with Law, in this video. Like, obviously, I do actually disagree with him a lot on those particular things. And actually, like, that opinion is something that like, it's really, really common. Everybody sort of thinks that way. And they always have. It's a really complicated ability, and things that are that complicated, you generally look at how bad it could be. And yeah, and certainly it could be really, really bad. And I actually agree with Law in the respect that the ability is just too complicated, just straight up. You kind of need like 2 tables of data to tell you who's getting what when you cast Symbiosis at who, and that's not right. I think, number one, at the very least, that table information needs to be incorporated into the game somehow, and that is absolutely, at the very least, what they need to do. Then I actually would be a big fan of if they just said, well, it's class specific rather than spec specific, because having different abilities for all these different specs is just, yeah, I think it's a bit overkill, to be honest, and I wouldn't mind seeing that change. But at the same time, I do understand that outside of PvE, well, I should say outside of raiding in particular, there are a lot of people who are really into having that sort of complex kind of thing, and a lot of people will really dig it, so that might be just my personal preference. One last thing I want to make a point of is that overall in Symbiosis, nothing really contributes to a DPS increase. You need to probably sit down and theory craft mirror images. It's possible that mirror images does enough DPS that it's worth casting every time it's available. I honestly don't think it would be. Playing some balance myself, my main spec is Resto, but there is only one class that I found that did get a DPS increase, or basically an increase to their main function in the raid, other than tanks of course, but like even healers didn't get a benefit to healing, and that was Death Knights. And the bonus to Death Knights is the Wild Mushroom Plague basically saves them a single GCD every 3 minutes that can be casted in an AoE situation. So that's not every boss fight. It's, you know, potentially boss fights with ads, and it's for the duration that the ads are up. I don't think that's a big deal at all. I mean, that's, yeah, a single GCD. Bear in mind that Death Knight GCDs are only 1 second. They're not even 1.5 second GCDs for the class. Since patch 5.04, where you know, the GCD decrease was taken off Unholy Presence and just given across the board for the entire class. So yeah, in AoE situations, Death Knights get an extra GCD. They still have the rune generation mechanic, so it's not like they generate runes any quicker, but yeah, means that they can maybe get an extra white swing or something. I'm not really sure. I haven't looked too much into it, just other than, you know, figuring out what the rotation is and how much time you actually save. So yeah, I don't think that is exactly the sort of increase that I would say, okay, this has to go to a Death Knight now, because I don't think that you trust anybody in this game to be perfect to the point where every single GCD is accounted for, even at the very, very top levels of rating. So anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts on Symbiosis. I definitely think it's not something to be concerned about. I should say it's not something to be concerned about in its current iteration. It could be something to be concerned about if things changed. I would love to see it simplified. I would love to see some changes made to it just to cut it back. But overall, I actually quite like it. It's, you know, in a raid, something cool to give you tank. Anyway, thanks for watching. And like I said, I made a post about this some time ago on my blog, sometimesattree.com. Yeah, feel free to check it out. And yeah, thanks for watching.